Hi. Just for my own curiosity, any first-timers here? Oh, wow. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. We have several board members here, our amazing team, including Talina and Sam and Tom. Love to welcome you all here, and especially the newcomers. The church is an art, culture, and creativity space located right here in the heart of Sag Harbor. We present programming year-round. We have a beautiful gallery upstairs with a world-class contemporary art exhibition on view called Threading the Needle, which is about the history of textiles in contemporary art. It's a really fabulous show. We also are going to have events all weekend. Join us if you're interested on Saturday and Sunday. We are presenting a one-woman show called The Ecstasy of Victoria Woodhole, which is a one-woman presentation inspired on the very true story of the first ever female candidate for president, which happened in 1854. Is that right, Talina? 1872. That's still a good number of years before women were able to vote. Yeah, exactly. So please join us for that if you're interested. My name is Sherry Pascarella. I am the newly appointed executive director of the church. I am so happy to be here with you all. Thank you so much. Thank you to April Gornick, Eric Fischel, E.T. Williams, Sally Sussman, and any other board members here for your ongoing vision and support. And as I said, thank you to all of you, and thank you for those of us who are here for the first time. You're coming here, of course, in support of a really wonderful and worthy organization called the Bridgehampton Child Care and Recreation Center. The church is extremely pleased to be able to share our resources with worthy causes throughout the East End, and particularly those who are interested in conversations about equity and equality. And that is the programming that Bonnie Michelle Cannon, who is the ED of the Bridgehampton Child Care and Recreation Center, has assembled for you all. We are enormously pleased and honored to present Ursula Burns in conversation. And I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Bonnie. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to host you guys today. Thank you, everybody. And for all of you who are new here, I saw a huge show of hands. Please come back. We'd love to see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a wonderful day for us to be here. For those of you that don't know, my name is Bonnie Michelle Cannon. I am the executive director for the Bridgehampton Child Care and Recreational Center. Our mission is that we are a historically Black, community-based institution who serve all East End marginalized children and families. That is what we do. Let's give that a hand. Part of what we do also is that we like to have community awareness and have conversations, and we've created this series called the Thinking Forward Lecture Series, where we bring certain individuals out just to have conversations. And we've had certain individuals like Misty Copeland, Khalil Gibran Muhammad, Sherilyn Ifield, and others that have come through. And today we have been blessed to have Miss Ursula Burns to be here with us. Let's give her a hand. And we have a wonderful advisory board. And part of our advisory board that we have here is Mr. Ken Miller, who is going to be moderating and interviewing and giving insight. And Ken is a part of the family, along with many of our other advisory board members that we have here. I don't want to call out so many names because I'll forget, but I see my auntie Linda over there, Linda Bird Frankie. Cheryl McNeil is here. We have Brandon Ray is here. Sylvia Loria, I saw her somewhere in the back here. And did I miss anybody, Deb? Maria Lavezzo is in the back as well. And Lucas Weinstein. Lucas Weinstein is here also. And there are others that are on advisory board, and Kimberly Goff is sitting right here. And so let's give them a hand. It was wonderful when our partner, our collaborator, had mentioned equity, because that is what we are doing at the center, is building equity through our many programs. One of our programs that we have is called the Teach Me How to Fish program, and is a workforce training program where we have individuals that are learning how to become software engineers, learning trades, learning how to get into business of real estate, entrepreneurship, and they right now, we have several of them that are in a 3-month internship working for a technology company, and it was their assignment that they needed to be here today to hear this conversation. And I'm going to have them to stand because they are in the audience. Will you all stand, Soter Technology interns? Thank you. We have one that's parking and that one that's ill, but there's 2 additional ones there. So these are kind of the type of conversations that we have. Can I make the announcement of our next one, of our next presentation, Deb? Yes. Okay. I'm getting everything out the way. So our next conversation is going to be, and you guys are hearing it for the first time, August the 12th at First Baptist Church in Bridgehampton. We will have none other than the Reverend William Barber that will be speaking there at that. You'll look out for it. You'll have to Eventbrite, and it's going to sell out quickly. So please come to that. We have a Black Film Festival that's coming out as well. Please look for that as well. And anything else? We're having, one of the things that I wanted to do this year is because of the fact that we've all been through challenges, the pandemic and so on and so forth. I wanted to celebrate. I said, we're not going to have this sit down, table, food type of thing where it's a little stiff and stuffy. I just want to celebrate and dance. So we're having the Jazz Soul celebration next Friday next Saturday, July 30th from 5 to 8. See Deb in the back that's giving me all the right things to say. And we're going to be having the John Ludlow Jazz Duo and the Earth, Wind, and Fire Tribute Band is going to be there as well. So see Deb in the back. I'm going to stop talking and thank you all. Get to know us. Stop by the center. We have a brand new building that we've built that you've probably seen. We do wonderful things, so please get to know us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ken Miller and Ursula Burns. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Our plan today is for Ursula and me to just have a chat for about 45 minutes and then open it up to questions from you all. I thought I'd start by just saying a few words about Ursula's book, which she's probably no longer actively selling, but it came out last year. I'm always selling. Okay. And I'll just tell you a few things that I learned from looking at it. Ursula grew up in a poor family. I think the book says that her mother never made more than $4,400 a year, and she was one of 3 children. And I wouldn't say she grew up in poverty because her mother was a most amazing individual, and that comes through in the book. After growing up in a poor neighborhood, predominantly black, she went somehow to Polytechnic and became an engineer. And then she went to work at Xerox. I may be leaving out a few important steps, but she was at Xerox. She was at Xerox for almost 30 years, and she ultimately came to helm it, as they say. She was the chairman and CEO, and today she's at the absolute pinnacle of our system. She's on the board of Exxon, Nestle, Uber, the Mayo Clinic, MIT, and the Ford Foundation. I'm probably leaving off a few, but you don't need any more after that. So it's going to be a special pleasure to be able to talk to her. She also is, I think I can add, was quite important and, well, friendly with Barack Obama and a big supporter of Hillary Clinton. So with that, I think we'll just get right into it. I will say that Well, let me just ask the first question. Why'd you write the book? Do you think that, would you like the takeaway to be different for white people and black people? Or what do you think the point of it should be to a reader?
So two different questions. Why did I write the book, which is simpler to answer than the second question, which is the takeaway. I do a lot of speaking, particularly to students, at universities or high school, and whenever I would be done with these speeches, honorary degree, graduation kind of things, people would come up and say, you should write a book, you should write a book. And I said, yeah, right. I'm not going to write a book. And I would always say no. And I was doing a speech at a commencement speech at Howard University. And it was an amazing, Vernon was there, President Obama was there, it was amazing. And I got off the stage and the kids came up and said, mulling around, you should write a book, you should write a book. And I said, I'm not gonna write a book. And Vernon Jordan said to me, write the goddamn book. And that's basically why I wrote the book, because it was this unending thing about writing a book, writing a book, writing a book. Second part of the question is, I think that the message is identical for women, men, for black, white, for Asians, etc. And it's a message of, you can't do it alone. And if there's this belief, and there are people, our past president is one, and I'm not going to get too political, who actually believe that they did this all by themselves. That he's great, I'm this really smart, I have all that it takes to be the perfect human, and therefore, put me in charge. I think one of the things that comes out in this book, and it was not meant to be that way, but Linda Bird Franke, who was my guidance through this whole thing, I would have quit 20 times. She was the one who helped me write it. It would have been hard for me to write a book without mentioning people, so I switched it around and said I'm going to write a book basically about people who helped me. And it came out of so it comes out like a memoir for me, but if you go through the book, you'll see that just about every chapter there's like these bright shining lights who helped me through life and gave me a good life.
Well, that generosity of spirit comes through the book. You thank the people who helped you, black and white, along the way. Let's get to the question of today and how you see the world. We're still in the full flow of the Trump phenomenon. How do you look at the Trump phenomenon from the point of view of race relations in America today?
So I'll say race and gender. I'll say established privilege and underprivileged and not established. There's many different, fully able and less able, you name it. There is definitely clarity. President Trump made clear that there is a preference in this society for people who fall in one section of the society, who look like a certain type, act like a certain type, came from a certain place, and that everyone else, this is the dangerous part, deserves to be something less than that. So he actually legalized, he made standard conversations, some of them very overt, some of them a little bit more nuanced, that you don't belong here. If you're a woman, you don't really belong here, but just by the grace of God, we're letting you in the room. If you're black, if you're Mexican, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what he did was make what was in the back of a lot of people's minds, including our own sometimes, right? We all have hate in our minds occasionally. He actually brought that to the front and made it possible for people to say it, and literally not have people be shocked by it. And it's one of the most dangerous situations that you can be. We are all on the edge of being bad people. We have all it takes to be good and to be bad. And the thing that keeps us in check is we have these little things, your mother, whoever it is, government authority, police, the church, who say, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. And he basically said, go there, go there. And I'm going to structure a system. It's called the United States government infrastructure, that's going to make it more and more possible for people who look like him to go there without any retribution, without any problems. And it's a very dangerous place to be. At the end of the day, he is not the problem. As Charles Blow said, he told us who he was. He's not the problem. So the problem, one of the reasons why I moved to London in 2017, January, is because my husband and I decided that we could not live in this country. We could not live in this country, not because Trump was president, but because 20 million goddamn people voted for him. That means that you're sitting on the train in New York City and you're looking around going, not in New York City. The good news about New York City, you sit on the train, most of the people are not like him, but I have a place in Florida. You go to the Whole Foods in Florida, 95% of the people in the Whole Foods in Florida agree with what the hell he said. And the danger there is that I could protect myself. There is a system, a legal system, but based on where we're headed, the laws, I mean, they were never applied equally, but now but we were moving towards that, right? The arc of justice thing. Right now we're moving far away from it. So I am really concerned about the world. A friend of mine, Holly Peterson, who's in the front, sent me something when I was this morning, and I'm like, why did you send this goddamn thing to me, right? Because I read it, and it was about Trump's coming back and what it would mean structurally, what it could mean structurally, and it's just, we could be there. We could be there. We could be we just took away the right, forget about what you believe for yourself. We just took away the right for a woman to have a determination of her own body. You can believe this or not. If you don't believe it, don't do it. But you can't say to Joanne over there, I'm going to tell you what to do as well. And for it to happen, for men to say it to women, I would be fine having a debate with a whole bunch of women. I'm appalled that we're in the position now, as my daughter said, she says to me all the time, are we at that again? I mean, I thought we solved this damn problem. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. That's great. You know, one of the interesting things is that nobody in America, very few people, well, not that many people like to be called racist. That's a good thing, I guess. But it's hard to ignore race when you grow up in a country with the history that ours has. I wonder if you could talk about what structural racism is, as opposed to racism in general.
Yeah, I think that the idea, discussing race and racism are two completely different places. I don't believe that you can, I think discussing differences is a strength, not a weakness. I think I have no problem when people say to me, when people ask me questions like, what does it feel like to be, these kinds of things. Regular people, I mean, there's some real jerks who do it, but I think that the structural racism is, I describe this as the following. Think about a game. The field is designed as this room. The people who designed the field are a whole bunch of white guys. They designed the field. The rules are a set that you see in the book. The people who wrote the rules are a whole bunch of white guys, the same white guys who designed the field. The judges of whether or not you're complying with those rules are the same white guys who designed the field and wrote the rules. And we can keep going on and on and on and on and on. And so racism and sexism and all of the isms is when we try to bend, when everyone else is forced to bend themselves into that form, on that playing field, by those rules, with no retribution, no ability to actually speak back. And that's what we have in the United States. What we have in the United States, even though I'm sitting here, there's a whole bunch of black people sitting here, I guess a whole bunch of liberals, I could actually make this really bad and have all the Trump guys sit over here, and a whole bunch of liberals, whatever. We actually have, we have criminalized difference. We've made it, and the bad thing, or good thing, I think it's a really good thing, but it's becoming a worse thing, about black people is that you can avoid it, right? We just wake up one day and we present ourselves to the world and people say, I know exactly who you are. And we haven't opened our mouth. And the rules are that they place you off the field. They place you off the field. They don't give you access to the education or the opportunities or the means or the power or the voice that puts you on the field. And then they say, you know, you're a jerk, you're an asshole, whatever the heck, you know. So it's just structural racism is what we live in today in the United States and many other places in the world.
Yeah, you know, I read recently that black people die disproportionately from traffic accidents. And I thought, could that be true per capita? And maybe it's because highways have been run through communities that they shouldn't have been run through. Maybe it's because less expensive cars are used. Apparently, black women who are very well off and have great diets have unusually difficult childbirths. Do you know about these things? Do you think that they are decent examples of structural racism?
Yeah, those are the easy ones, right? I mean, dying from traffic accidents, it is more than just they have worse cars, they're more tired, by the way. They have to go further to get basic services. It's just, if you look at the demographics of how a black person lives, I talk a little bit about this in the book, the amount of time to complete a task. So you want to shop, right? We all want to go shopping. We have to buy food for, a black person literally will take 40 times more, takes 40% more time because they live farther away from good food or they don't even have access to good food. So we've been marginalized in many, many, many ways. And I say black, but it's really important that black is the word I use where a whole bunch of people fit under it, right? So brown people fit under it, poor white people fit under it, even though poor white people have a little bit of an advantage, but they sit under it. It's about the structure, this playing field was designed in such a way that for us to get access to it, we have to kind of chop down trees and build a road, et cetera. And most other people just get up and go down to the Whole Foods. We don't have. When I was growing up, we were in, and they still exist, food deserts. So my mother used to have to get a shopping cart. We got on the bus, and they didn't have Uber, and we couldn't take a taxi. Taxis didn't come to the neighborhood I was in, so we had these gypsy cabs, if you remember gypsy cabs? And those were the safest things in the world, so nobody died in those gypsy cabs, right? So the whole structure is built in such a way that, I mean, and this is not new, so, speaking about this I'm not revealing anything to anyone. The part that's troubling is that we were on a path, slow one. My book is an example of some of the progress that can be made and that was made. We were on a path where begrudgingly or joyfully, I don't know which one it is and don't particularly care, we were starting to kind of balance it a little bit. And then we had two big events. The first was we had this crazy man as president who literally destroyed America. It's a long time before we're going to be able to get back to where we were before. And then we had this other crazy thing called COVID, where if you look at death, economic displacement, educational displacement. For women, this is globally, and people of color, we were set back 20 years. I was on the G7 initiative to try to figure out a whole bunch of stuff, this gender equity thing, a Global 7 group, and the data is there. We would literally, it was a great opportunity for people to kind of move back. The line, we had made it a little bit over the line, and they pushed us all back over the line, and we have to start again from not that line, but from 20 years behind that line.
Yeah.
Most people don't wake up in the morning, I have to say this always because there are white men in this room. You guys don't wake up in the morning and say, well, I just don't like those black people, I don't like those women, we're gonna treat them badly. The thing I try to say is please understand where you're starting from, where you're living versus other people. Where you're starting from is a completely different place. You can walk, I have a son, beautiful, unbelievably smart, PhD from MIT, PhD from Stanford, 3 degrees from MIT. This kid's perfect. And not really, but you know what I mean. He did all the checks. And literally to this day, I tell him when he's going out, I say, you watch it, boy. I said, if you guys, the white people in this room don't say this to their kids. We have to. And that's the part that I think we have to just realize that there's an opportunity and a set of graces that you have, I talk about this a lot, that racism, the worst kind, is that you don't realize that you have those graces. And you expect people to perform just like you performed and live just like you live. And why don't you get it? Why don't you understand it? Why is it taking you so long? This understanding what we have built in this country, great stuff, this church, the roads, the lights, that's great, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that we've built that has to be dismantled.
Well, I get it. I want to talk to you about the history of the civil rights movement in the face of this phenomenon you're describing. When I went down to Little Rock in '65 to teach at a black college, that was the year after Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman were killed. And it was, I think, that was '65. I think in '66 already, the black and white period of the civil rights movement was coming to an end. Stokely Carmichael started the Black Power movement, and then there were the Panthers, and there was a long period of that. And then Malcolm was killed, and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were killed. And fast forward to today, we still have white people making analogies between, well, you know, the Italians came over and they did fine. I mean, you don't know where to start when people make that analogy between immigration and the phenomenon of slavery. But today we still have a civil rights movement. What do you have to say about how the leadership of the civil rights the civil rights movement has evolved, and where are we today with Black Lives Matter, and who is the heir to some of the previous leaders?
Yeah, so I think that seeking an heir is probably the wrong approach right now. I don't think that, you know, the times have changed. There's a whole, you know, we have this thing called, I was just talking to somebody, Facebook and Twitter and all of these other things, where we actually even have today this thing called fake news, which is presented as real news, right? So I think the battle has to change a little bit, pretty significantly. And we do need leaders, but those leaders are going to be in industry, they're going to be in government, they're not going to be the person only, the person who carries the banner of I am the civil rights leader, which we needed before. So I think that if it's not dispersed, which is trying to be, then we're going to fail. Right? So Darren, I'm on the board of the Ford Foundation. One of the reasons why it's one of the toughest boards that I'm on. It's probably the most difficult environment to operate in, because the mission is like, it's harder than getting to the moon, is to eradicate inequality. It's how do you even define it, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why I bring it up is that the person who's leading it right now is he's a civil rights leader. He's a civil rights leader. He comes at
Darren Walker.
Darren Walker. He comes at the problem from the root of the problem. This is not a black problem. This is not a white problem. This is a humanity problem, and we have to kind of re-educate everyone. One of the things that happens now in corporate America, everybody knows about the fact that we have diversity things, right? We have DEI officers, diversity committees, and diversity everything, or whatever it is. So if you look at diversity, this is my latest, you know, bee in my bonnet, not a big bonnet, but you know, it's a pain in my rear end, is when you talk about diversity, they say, oh, we have to talk about diversity. And you say, well, okay, let's talk about it. They say, well, we're going to bring in the black people and the women. And I said, well, diversity means black and women. Diversity doesn't mean that at all. Right? So and the diversity officer has to be, generally is, an African American or Latinx person. What? It only applies to us, right? We have to kind of figure out a way to fit into this system. All that ramble to say that we can have individual leaders. We'll have some lights that shine occasionally, but in this town, you have to have people who push against the system. In New York City, you have to have people who push against the system. In the school, you have to have people who actually, I don't mean create a war and displace without replace, right? Because that's one of the things that could happen, is this we're going to burn the whole damn thing down and there's nothing to replace it, and that's not good. So we have to kind of manage it, but we can't look to someone else and say, please help us solve this, please solve this problem. And that's what a lot of times we're trying to do.
Okay, but you mentioned earlier that, you mentioned your son earlier, the PhD from Stanford. I think his name is Malcolm.
That's it.
And I just want to pause for a minute on Malcolm X and see what we can say about him. He was against integration, and he was critical of Martin Luther King for being nonviolent. And then, of course, anybody who's alive remembers what he said when Kennedy was shot, namely, the chickens have come home to roost. I think a lot of white liberals wonder, after all the contributions that black people have made to America, the blood that's been spilled in America's wars, the contributions to culture, how black people contain their anger at the continuing injustice of it all. What do you think about, in retrospect, and then there was Garvey and all these other attempts to find the right tone, the right note. That's why I asked about a leader for today. But looking back to Malcolm X, what do you say about that time and the transition in the way America is struggling to become a multiracial democracy?
So this is being filmed. And I have to make sure I understand what's going to happen to this thing after it goes, which I didn't check. So if you're going to send it someplace, I want to you got to cut this part out. Yeah, I know that they will send it. So I know, Holly, thank you, but I'm going to say it anyway, goddamn, because I'm too old to. I think Martin Luther King and I think Malcolm X was absolutely appropriate for the time, more than appropriate for the time. I think we had unbelievable amount of restraint to not do what he was articulating. We are in a situation, and it just is happening now more than ever, that we have divided the country up. And by the way, it would be great if it was 50-50, but it's not. It's like 2-98, right? We've divided the country up, and we've said to the people in the country, some of you have a chance who are in this 98 to maybe move up to the 2, right? We're going to allow you to get in. And the rest of you don't have a shot at all. And I always say this, if you have an island and only the people who look like X or have something lives on the island, and all the good stuff is on the island, and then everybody else lives outside of the island, and there's a moat around the island. They're going to live there for a long time until they just get fed up. And then they're going to actually storm the Bastille. And I think it's really important that we think about what kind of a structure we're setting up in the United States today. Actually, it's not only here. France has it, UK has it. What structure we're setting up? We're setting up a set of people who actually have no chance to make it. They literally live in neighborhoods that have horrible education systems, that have absolutely no there is no way, you have to be, I say this in my book, people say, well, you did it. I said, well, my mother was a friggin' superwoman. You can't expect everybody to do this, right? It's just not, if that's the norm to get me to just get to high school and then to college, then my goodness, we don't ask anybody to do this. And that's what we're at. So I think that there is a caution that we have to have. I clearly like my life. I like where I live. I like the fact that I don't have to walk around with a gun, with guards all the time. So I like that, and I don't want to give that up. But I think that we are getting closer and closer to people not having any hope for a long time, and you see it happen. And then when it happens, then you lose control of the society. You have anarchy.
Right, because when you look at it, for many, many years now, black people have had huge successes in entertainment and sports. But when I founded Urban National Corporation back in the early 70s, there were like 5 graduates of the Harvard Business School who were black, and famously, most of them went crazy trying to integrate into corporate America.
But I'm going to interrupt you and say something. So, I just get so annoyed with the entertainment and sports analogy. Look at who owns studios. Look at who owns teams. Black actors and black sports people are workers. They just happen to pay more money, but they are workers. And I don't mind, by the way, it's great to have some really rich workers, but they don't control their lives. That's why somebody like, what's the guy's name who just named this? Jay-Z. That's right. This is why not Jay-Z as well. Jay-Z as well. When they actually move, you look at who I was with one of them last week, and the football team owners. There's one team whose the owner is an asshole. He's a sexist, a racist, whatever the hell. So we were saying, why don't you just kick him out? Yeah, he owns the team. We can't really break it. And we don't have the power there. We don't have the power there. The good news is some of them are taking that power, somebody like Oprah, somebody like Jay-Z, somebody like, what's the other guy? What's the guy who makes all of the movies? Tyler Perry, who starts, thank you, I should know that, but I've never seen any of his movies, unfortunately, but he's a guy who's basically said, we can do it this way, or we can start our own thing. And I'm on the board of this organization called Group Black. It's a crazy organization. What kind of name is Group Black? I remember when they asked me to be on the board, I'm like, Group Black? I put that on my resume, right? So ExxonMobil, Uber, Group Black. And it's about participation. The whole point of the board is about participation in entertainment and arts. And it's fledgling organization. It's all about owning stations, not only owning content, but owning the delivery of content, so that we can actually have a little bit more of a voice. By the way, the great news here is that women are in the same place. White women. You look at most of the structure in this country, even the female sports teams, all of them are owned by white men. And it's just something that we have. I like white men. They're really good friends of mine. Lots of them are really good friends of mine. Some of my best friends, I say this in the book, some of my best friends are white men. But we have to, right? They say, I know some black people, some of my best friends are black, right? But I really do have no problem. But it is not, this is part of the ease I was talking about. This is the broadened view of make sure that you understand the privilege that you have.
Well, one of the privileges that you've had is that you're in some of the most select discussions that anyone can have. You're at the pinnacle of the power structure, and yet you look out at a community that, as you say, the throw weight of the black community is still, by many standards, oppressed. But so let's talk about American capitalism for a second, and the corporation, and then we should soon get to opening it up for questions, so have maybe your questions ready. But in my lifetime, when I first came to Wall Street, all a corporation was supposed to do was serve the shareholder constituency. And if they could externalize costs by, say, dumping chemicals into the Hudson River, they would do it. But now corporations are supposed to be socially conscious. There's only so much you can do as one person on a board. Usually, maybe you can pick one issue and keep hitting it. But what do you think the possibilities are for corporate America to contribute to a multiracial democracy?
I think that it's interesting that there is this is one of the few countries where the fundamental governance system fights continuously with the fundamental economic system. That's what we do that's basically, we have a whole government structure where corporations are on one side, big, little, or whatever, and then on the other side is the government, and there's this continuous fight, scrum in the middle to try to figure out a way to kind of not have one guy get more or the other. There are a lot of economies that don't run that way. I think we have a very specific problem that we're going to have to solve on how we work. This is what we call public to private partnership. It's required. And I'll do a divergence. I'm working with some of the government, commerce and the like, on this Innovation Act about chips. Who knows anything about chips? Chips are, everything. Your toaster even has them now. So your car, everything has them. We don't make any. We actually do make some, but the fundamental infrastructure, the basis for a chip is a silicon wafer. You don't have to know too much about this, but there are foundries that have to be built, that are built to do this. We have none, zero. Most of them come from Taiwan. There's another one in France, and we may have a small one that can do 5 a day in the United States somewhere, in some skunk works. Somebody in government realized, my God, this is a problem, right? Particularly since Russia invaded the Ukraine, everybody started to think, oh my God, if Russia could invade the Ukraine, China could probably invade Taiwan. And it wouldn't be that much of an invasion because Taiwan is actually part of China, even though it's one, what is it, 2 forms, 1 government, whatever the heck they call it. And they said, oh my goodness, if these guys actually decided to turn off the chip, we couldn't fly a plane, we couldn't drive a car, we couldn't do anything. It's one of the scariest things in the world. So finally somebody wakes up and says, oh my God, we should probably do chips. So they go to the business people. It costs about $50 billion to do one of these foundries. It's like chump change, not. And if you don't have an assured supply, very few companies can actually, it takes 3 years, 5 years, but we could probably cut it to 3. No company can actually do that. It would be probably the death of them. The way that you do this is that you have a partnership with the government that says, this is a strategic thing, we're gonna work together to, oh my God, you would think you were cursing somebody's mother by saying that we should work with the government. The government says, we don't work with business that way. It's called, and this is where the Dems are wrong. I'm clearly a Dem, but this is what it's called corporate welfare. I said it's called survival, guys. We can worry about the splits later, but if we don't have a way to do this, we're gonna be in trouble. And this play that we have, where we have so divided ourselves into corners against common sense, because that's what's in the middle, is common sense, is what we're doing here. Just about everything that has to do with business. But let me go to the question. Corporations had a role. I led my company for 9 years, and it was the easiest job in the world compared to what it is now. I had one goal. That's called maximize shareholder return. That's it. Now, I did it a little bit differently because I had this kind of thing in the back of my head that said, I had a very large workforce in a very captive community, Rochester, New York. And so I remember when we had to do layoffs, if you fire somebody in Rochester, New York, you're literally screwing them, big time. They have nowhere they can go. Their house is there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would always pause and do these kind of, let's make sure we're not separating 2 people in a family, because that would really, and I got beat to heck by investors, right? Because they're like, that's not your job. That's called a social issue. By the way, we're dealing with this now, every single day. The voter suppression acts that have come out by states, this amicus brief for Harvard about admissions, Roe v. Wade, companies are now being forced by themselves, by their constituents, or by the outside world, meaning their customers, or in some places, even their shareholders, to take a stance. But it's really interesting. Many, many, many companies, still leaders of companies, do not believe it is their responsibility. But that can't be so. We employ large corporations, the top 40 or 50, employ 800,000 people, and we have no voice about anything. We just kind of sit and say, yeah, you can do whatever you want. That just can't be appropriate. I led from the perspective of, I have a point of view. By the way, my point of view doesn't have to be your point of view, Mr. Worker or Miss Worker, but I have a point of view. I have a point of view. If I was still at Xerox, I would say Roe v. Wade should stand, should have never been overturned. I would say that we have voter suppression in friggin' Georgia, in Florida, some in New York State. CEOs, many of them, won't do it. Ken Frazier would. Ken Chenault does. Are they different humans? So I just think I'm rambling to say that corporations are going to have their comeuppance too if they don't figure out a way to become more involved, not doing what government does, but making sure that government understands the perspective that they have vis-a-vis the rest of the world and these issues in the world. But we don't do that. We don't do that often.
Okay. Do you want to say anything about how gender fluidity and trans has changed the women's movement? Do you have a comment about the women's movement as it is today in the face of these developments? You can say no. I know you know how to do that.
I definitely know how to do that. I haven't thought about it from, except for in sports, where I definitely have an opinion, but that's
Right.
just an opinion. I think that gender fluidity, etc., is as much a man's movement issue as it is a woman's movement. It's a world issue. It's an issue, right? An issue. When I mean issue, it's not an issue problem. It's an issue. It is an issue problem because we haven't articulated yet the stance that we have on it. It's something we have to deal with, right? And all kinds of rules, like if you were born a male, genetically a male, or whatever it is, and then you transition, can you operate in sports with? I think that's a fair question. And if you're a woman's sport, you should be able to argue your point of view, and the person who transitioned should be able to argue theirs. But this is not, these are not, this is another problem what I consider of Democrats. We make these, we're not talking about basic stuff here. We should be talking about basic things. It's not about whether that person should be able to do what, it's whether any person has the right. We have to generalize these things a little bit more. If we keep dividing them up into little slices, we have 15 people that we're trying to arbitrate control or power over there, and the Republicans, excuse me for doing it that way, but the more conservative are sticking to the game. And the game is whoever it is who doesn't look like us, out, and whoever looks like us in. I'm simplifying, it's obviously not that way, and it's not all Republicans and all Dems, but the shortcuts make it easy to describe. Yeah. So I just think that I think that we should talk about it and come to some conclusion, but this is not the earth-changing thing here. It's gonna change our lives forever.
Okay. I have a million more questions, but let me stop there. I think, is there a microphone that's available to people in the audience? There we go. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? Do you would like to ask?
Let's give them a hand while people are getting their questions. And before I do this, because I'd be remiss, Ken, you did a wonderful job moderating, but you cannot do this without your better half. And our Libis is in the audience as well. Libis Sweezy, who is on our advisory board. You can go home tonight. Guys, have any questions?
Hello, everybody. I'm Brandon Ray. I'm author of Synergy Meet, A Practical Guide to Becoming a Master Networker, which I have a copy for you, Ms. Burns. And I'm an advisory board member and a corporate exec, been on 2 Fortune 10 companies, and a Howard University alum. So I was happy to hear that that Mr. Jordan, Trustee Jordan, was the life-changing part for you to write your book. And I want to go to a chapter in my book to ask a question of yours. In networking, I really believe you have to have a personal board of directors, and being in your role as CEO of Xerox, I'm sure it's been some times where it's a little lonely. Who is your personal board of directors, personal or professional board of directors, besides, of course, the board that you had to report to as CEO, but outside of that helped push you through and help you thrive and succeed in your capacity as CEO? Thank you.
Yeah, I happen to be fortunate in that I have a personality that doesn't require a lot of interaction from other people. So I can be, that wasn't meant to be funny, but you know what I mean. I'm not one of these people who, I'm essentially an introvert. I write about this in the book. And one of the good things about that is that you, as an introvert, you stand back a lot and watch, right? You stand back a lot and watch how things happen in the world. And you don't feel as though you have to actively engage all the time. So I was able to select or be selected by people by being just quiet. I'm not often quiet, but so here's my personal board of directors. I have 3 girlfriends and my sister, so 4 black women who just are regular old people. I mean, who they don't make a lot of money, but they know more about the world and about life than anybody who I know, and they're just good friends. And then I have, and that's a long standing, I mean, my sister obviously for her whole life, or she's younger than me, so my whole life. And then my friends, I was an engineer at Xerox when I met them. They were not at Xerox. One was a real estate broker, the other one is an artist, who just, you attach to early in your life. Then I was able to, because people started to like me. I met my husband, but that's a little bit different. I pursued him, by the way. He was really cute, and Xerox was 20 years older, so I kind of messed around with him, and then we finally got married. And then I met a guy, and I had a lot of people, right? And I had a great life in the beginning, poor but structured, great mother, unbelievable education by our standards. I mean, probably a horrible education by most standards. But the basics we learned, my mother taught discipline, all of this stuff like that, went to college, went to graduate school, went to work at Xerox. And that was what I called a good life. My mother had set up this structure for me to have a good life. And it was working. It was really, really good. And then I met a guy. His name was Vernon Jordan, who took this good life and transformed it into a great life. Louis, out of nowhere, my good life, please, my good life was just fine. But now I'm sitting in front of you guys and people, I wrote a book. I fly on planes, I meet the president. Literally impossible without this one guy who decided early on that I was somebody he would take interest in. So he took me places. I'm like, well, we're gonna go to someplace in New Jersey. Can you be downstairs at 5? I was with my husband this time. He said, is your man with you? I said, yeah, he's here. He said, tell him to come down too. We get in the car, we go to New Jersey, and we're meeting with Bill Clinton. This is Bill Clinton, the candidate. This is interesting. How did I get into this room? And why did he do that? And throughout my life, literally from the day I met him till the day he passed away, till the day he died, this guy literally talked to me and gave me guidance and direction and access and credibility. And so I had a little network around him. Him, Ken Chenault. I met Ken Frazier later. He did this for Ken Chenault as well. And then I expanded my network to the next circle. So I have that circle, which is these big black guys who, can rule the world. I have my family who's like poor but really solid. And now I have a whole different set of friends, an additional set of friends who are all like they're the combination of these two people. They have access. They are great people who you could just tell stories to, be natural with. So I've been very fortunate to be able to kind of have these crews with me as I go through life. But I try to tell this to my son. I was talking to somebody about this earlier. They're small crews and they're tight crews. It's not like a lot of people come in, not because I don't want them in, but I prefer to be kind of alone. I have these little crews, and I've been fortunate to have them with me forever. Linda, yeah. So I want Linda to stand. Stand up. Because this book would not have been possible without Linda, right? And I'll tell you one story. Linda and we wrote this book, and I had not seen you live. I met you live once in the...
Well, several times.
Oh, yeah, a couple of times. But we literally started writing and then didn't see each other. Because COVID was COVID was on, so we did it all by phone. We didn't even do Zooms.
I know, you look great, though.
Thank you.
So my thought or question, and I've asked you this in the book, is why don't you run for office?
Yeah. Well, you know what, I would be, and I'm not being modest here, I would be a very bad politician. And I mean that there is a skill here. I mean, this doesn't work. This doesn't work in politics. This would not work, but this would be distracting. It'd be easy to attack and tear down. It works well when you work with somebody in politics, but if I did politics, I wouldn't be able. It's a little bit like Michael Bloomberg running for president. I mean, he works in New York. He can't. The story doesn't work anywhere else. I'm not appropriate for politics at all. I could probably do New York City mayor, because that's a kind of a little different thing. But I have zero interest. I would say negative interest in doing that
Negative
kind of a
interest.
role.
A few more questions? Somebody's going to go.
Hi. So I'm Retha Fernandez, and I had the pleasure of meeting you about 12 years ago when I was a young technology professional at a Gartner conference.
I love this. People say this, and I go,
You remember, right? You remember.
I don't even remember the conference, much less you.
The point is, I remember, and you've always been like an inspiration to me.
Thank you.
I am now one of those diversity officers that you were talking about in the public sector for Suffolk County. And my question is related to your board experience. And the definition of equity that I use is fair and just inclusion so that all can participate and prosper. To what extent are conversations around equity happening in the boardrooms where you're at?
It is outside of the financial results that you have to achieve, and it's where most of it is, the next big topic, there are three big topics now running through every board that I'm on and many boards that I'm not on. One is this idea of sustainability. I don't mean saving, the not wasting, the whole gamut of environmental justice. So how do we manage that? The second is on talent, and this is where, and how do we prepare ourselves, how do the companies prepare themselves for the future? One of the things I love is, I coined this phrase, not because, I don't love it because I coined it, but I coined this phrase called a simple math problem. If you look at the world today and you look at the birth rates and death rates, and you prepare your company for the future, if you're preparing the country or the company for the future, if you're not inclusive, you're going to run out of room in not so many lifetimes. This is what's happening to Japan. Literally, you just don't have enough people to backfill the thing. So it's a math problem, and people are really focused on it today. Talent, and how do we get the talent to look like something other than it looks like today? It's largely, particularly in tech companies, it's largely white and it's largely male. So that's the second big issue. And the third, so first is environment, second is talent, and then the third is this fundamental switch that we're having in what we call business models, because governments, we all tried to globalize. Remember, we were all globalizing everything. And now, literally, on a dime, we actually have to start localizing again. And we're not prepared for that as companies. Companies they have their supply chains all over the world. They have partnerships all over the world. It's illegal or immoral or something to do business with Russia, where we try to rush into Russia. Everybody has questions about China when we're rushing into China. So the third big topic is this. But it is, fortunately, the middle topic of this talent and diversity, equity, and inclusion is on the table. But I'm going to give you the quick answer, another part of the answer. When George Floyd was murdered, I was in London. I was flying back to London when he was killed, right? And Darren was somewhere in New York, whatever the heck it is. I was on the board of Nestle, and one of my board members runs a big sporting goods manufacturing company. Really cool guy from Austria, German, one of these guys, real cool. And he called me, and he said, "Hey, Ursula, I'd like to talk to you after doing the arrangements to get, we had to kind of figure it out. Yeah, how are you doing?" His name is Casper, a really cool guy. He said, "I want to talk to you about what's happening." I said, we talked about George Floyd. We talked about not George Floyd, the incident, but the fact that around the world, people were protesting. In London, they were protesting. I did the march. Everybody doing the march. In Germany, were protesting. And it was a very different feel. And he was just trying to figure out, okay, what's happening? Great conversation, actually really insightful guy to even reach out. At the end of the conversation, I said to him, "So why did you call me? By the way, I know you, thank you very much, but don't you have people on your board? Why don't you call some of your board members or your leadership team?" Not thinking about the question the way that it was posed, right? And he said, "I have none." And we started this thing called the board. Out of that, Darren, myself, and Gabby Salzberger and Teneo, the corporation Teneo, and Ford Foundation decided we're going to start this thing called the Board Diversity Action Alliance. Real simple. You need at least one person on your board, one black person on your board. Can you just get one? And if you have one, maybe you can get a second one. Literally, we don't police. It's just simple. And can you just get somebody who looks like the customer set? Of course, we got screamed at by the Hispanic people, which was fair, and so we had to adjust that, and we said, okay, brown and black. Anybody who doesn't look like those guys, can you get one or two of them on your board? Because when this guy calls me, he's reacting to a problem, right? So it's happened. If he has me, we may be able to design a system that doesn't have the problem embedded in the system at all. So that's the whole point there. So companies are moving. Forward-thinking CEOs are moving. The worst are the tech companies. They are horrible. They are horrible. And we have to be really careful about this, by the way. All of you have to be really careful about this, because we're handing over our life to these people, our everything to these people, and we have to be sure that they know how to govern this thing from the perspective that we want them to govern it from. The government can't do it, right? The only people who can do it are consumers. I think we have a little bit of time for a couple more. Let's start back there. Do that one, and then I'll come on to you.
I just wanted to ask about corporations. I think that, it is very nice to see some corporations using their power to move in the right way. But fundamentally, my question to you is, when we look at the fact that corporations were given the right to finance parties, and forgive me, the name of the ruling has just gone out of my head. That, I think, is something which has been very difficult in politics, to see just the amount of money and the way that it has been distributed in the financing of politics. So for you, where do you draw that line between action on one side as a company and then sort of direct involvement with political parties on the other?
Yeah, so corporations have, US corporations, and actually we're the latest. European corporations have had it for a lot longer than we have, do have very specific rules about how much money and then how much information, how much money they can give and how much information they have to provide in contributions, political contributions. The issue is that for every rule you put up, some smart person is going to figure out a way to get around it, right? So you couldn't give more than $2,600 if you were an individual and $10,000 if you were a company. Then they had this way to do super PACs, so on and so on. So the government is trying, and people are trying to actually keep pulling that back. And most companies, all of the boards that I'm on, are very, very clear where the money goes, every single one of them, and how much it goes to. You may not like where it goes, right? But it's all there. Here's the thing I think about corporations in general, that question in corporations in general. These people, these corporations they don't like exist and start working without people engaged. People own shares of these, I say this all the time, people own shares. Your retirement plans own shares. You should know what the companies that you're investing in are doing, and if you don't like it, you should literally get out of them. The biggest voice that we're going to be able to have is if we think oil and gas. If we think oil and gas is a bad thing, oil and gas industry is a bad thing, and you stop investing in it, this thing it'll either go to the Chinese, which not the best solution in the world, or the companies will close. So I actually say, yes, we have to be aware companies should not. There are all kinds of rules, but there's always some snaky person or company who could figure out a way around things, but you have to keep being vigilant and diligent in pursuing it. But I say this, like I say with politics, you can't be passive. Most people don't, you probably buy stuff from, there are companies that I will not buy things from. You should know who those are, and just, by the way, there's an alternative, and literally speak it up. I do it all the time. There's a company of cleaning products that I will not purchase their stuff. Really good stuff, it looks really good, but you can't do it. So I say to everyone, don't be passive. Don't expect somebody else to do it alone. Those people will help you, but you have to actually have a voice. We have to have a movement. We have 320 million people in this country, and we have 5 of them who speak up. And we have 1 of them who take action. I'm exaggerating, obviously. So we have to actually mobilize towards something. We can't be passive.
Ursula, I think we got off to a late start. Do you have time for one more
I just
question?
want to say I really admire you. When I applied to Columbia Business School and Harvard Business School in 1973, there were no women like you that I could look up to and admire. Now the women who are in business school can look at you and say, I can go down that route. And my second, so I just want to say that. Second of all, when you met Mr. Jordan and he says, you know, and he exposed you, were you the CEO of Xerox then, or you were climbing the corporate ladder? I don't mean.
I was really far from the CEO. I was the executive assistant, not the secretary, but the executive assistant, which is the chief cook and bottle washer of everything nobody else wants to do. You know, the speeches come together, the trips are arranged well. I was the executive assistant to the CEO. I was like a nobody. I was an engineer. I was pretty sharp. The reason why I got that job is I was sharp, but I was like, 20 years from getting there.
In terms of inclusion, minority, affirmative action, equal opportunity, they all originally stem from the concept of reparations, and now that word is coming back again. There was a study a long time ago, the Harvard students, I think, came out with this thing about for descendants. So in terms of the discussions on boards or whatever, around minorities or inclusion, oftentimes the benefits are not reaching the original target. So as you said before, 90% of people, black, people are just not getting these benefits. Who's showing up as a minority or who's showing up as black is not a descendant of the enslaved. Does the subject ever come up?
Never.
No, okay.
And it probably never will. I mean, it's at this point, I mean, maybe somebody will think of it, but at this point, the way that this works is twofold, right? There are things that companies can do immediately. They hire people, they promote people, they get a board, they give products, and they pay taxes. Well, good ones pay taxes. There are a lot of them that are trying to figure out a way to not pay any taxes, but they pay taxes. The way that corporations engage with the level of debate that you're having about reparations and descendancy and who do you really help, that's in the pay taxes part. So what we do is we walk to the government, we say, all that money you have, you should be working on these kinds of things. They don't do that kind of, companies do not do that kind of social policy, and they will never do it. So you do not, I mean, we can keep screaming at them. They have no time, energy, this is not their expertise. What they should do is pay taxes, and then the humans who actually engage with the government can actually say, this is what we want to have happen with these taxes. We are trying to actually, this is something that we're saying to companies, by the way, you should be, which they do now, you should go down and work with the police and teach them about good policing. I'm like, really? Is this what, by the way, we'll do that. We'll do a little bit of that, but if we're counting on that as a solution to this problem, we're going to have a bad society. This is what governments are for. I don't think that there's a separation, there's one side shouldn't talk to the other side, but we have to expect that they do what the structure is designed for them to do. And we're moving away. One of the big problems with government, with companies nowadays, they're saying, I can't go into this deep into K through 12 education. I can't go this deep into voting. I can't go this deep because it's just guys out there, men and women, who are doing it. We have structures that do that, and we have literally allowed them to abdicate their responsibility and not get engaged. And we just sit back and go, well, they're not doing it. Let's call the companies and start screaming at them. Scream at both of them, I think. It has to be done.
Ursula, listen, you've been very generous with your time. I just want to say one last thing, which is, you said about your husband that he mourned for the right things and he rooted for the right things. And you do too, and very appreciative of your being here with us today. Thank you.
Yes.